Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we're here with John Sneisen, author and economic analyst here at WAM, and we're going to go over the Manitoba budget because, you know, the way it seems to go is that people vote for the so-called PCs, so-called progressive conservatives, and they're not really conservative. They actually don't follow conservative philosophy at all. They're, you know, just on the surface, they kind of look like conservatives, but deep down, when you actually look at the budget, they're not. So John, can we go over the budget a bit here?
Well, it's interesting. We're going to look at the first big numbers, of course, that is always talked about, and it's the deficit. Of course, the old deficit for $420 million. Well, I say the actual deficit with the transfer payments was about, let's see now, what is the number here? It was about $2.3 billion was the deficit. A lot of people don't think as, of course, the deficit being, you know, just the deficit that they spend more than they have, but they actually get a transfer payment too, and that money wouldn't exist if Alberta didn't give it to everybody else.
Yeah.
So today's budget, that was the old one, that was for last year. Well, this year's budget, people like here in Manitoba, we had a big election where they voted in the PCs because they're so fed up with the NDP and their
rightly
deficit spending and all this money that they spent.
Yeah.
Well, surprise guys, surprise.
I can't help but say I told you so. I mean, I'm glad that Greg Selinger's gone too. Yeah. I couldn't be happier about that, but the fact is it's always more of the same because there's different control structures in place over every economy. So let's go into this a bit.
Yeah, so this year's budget, the main number that we're looking for again is, of course, $1.7 billion that is still in a transfer payment. But what is very surprising for a lot of people, and it came out of thin air, not a lot of people have seen and heard about this because they didn't make very much fuss about it at all in media. But now it's $890 million in the main deficit. So that means that we're at $2.6 billion in deficit.
Wow.
The current debt is $23 billion of Manitoba, and it's increasing every year. What are we going to do here? So let's look at some of the posts where they actually increase their expenditure. And of course it's the health and living
and seniors.
Yeah, and seniors, of course, which is understandable. When they built the structure that they have with free healthcare, of course, with the aging baby boomer population and so on, it's kind of expected that they have to, use a lot of money on that.
Sure.
Well, the problem is they're using more money that they don't have. This is the main issue. They need to cut massively in some places where the government is so overwhelming and big.
And look, I just want to quickly point out something. I want cuts. I think we should start in certain important places where it's most necessary first and create incentive to cut later on and not just pull the rug out from underneath someone. So for example, when we're monopolizing healthcare to the point where we are forced into needing it, basically, you know what I mean? They create the problem that they strive to solve, and it just doesn't make any sense. But of course, in order to fix that, we can't exactly just pull the rug out from underneath us. We got to start small and then get big later on, so that we're not throwing a whole bunch of people into poverty, which we're already pushing into poverty
anyway. There's so many people that are dependent on government today. It's ridiculous. Where the numbers are staggering around the world, and governments are becoming unsustainable. When they hit that expenditure of GDP of 50% plus, that's when the government is completely unsustainable and will crash. We've seen that in Greece, Portugal, Spain, and a whole bunch of other countries where the government is becoming so unsustainable that they can't run it anymore.
And the free market always thrives. People aren't escaping through barbed wire to escape a free market country. Basically, every time you see that, it's either a fascist, socialist, or communist country that they're escaping. Okay, let's go further
get back to the budget here. We have for this year, they actually increased the spending on education, $230 million. It'd be interesting to see what kind of programs they're implementing. I guess they want more more money to the re-education camps.
Oh yeah, the fun camps, as Hillary Clinton puts it.
And then of course this budget is very interesting from the old one. You would think that there'd be more openness since the PCs are there and so on, but actually it's way less informative. It's actually less less tabs to look for, for specific spending. So what they did, instead of under family services, they had children, youth opportunities, and then the family services, the CFS. That was the old one, which was $1.162 billion that they spent on the CFS there, and I know you've been covering the CFS a lot, Josh.
To the point of exhaustion, and I wasn't expecting anything much to change with the PC system.
But the thing is, it changed quite a bit. They're actually spending minus the children and youth opportunities, which is 50,000. I don't think they increased that 700,000. So I think they're spending a lot more money. I think we're looking at probably $500 million $500 million more on the CFS. So they're throwing more problem at a huge problem. And where do you think with that more spending on the CFS, because I know you've been covering this a lot, Josh, where do you think that's going to take the CFS?
Well, I think it's just going to lead to more kids getting taken away, and that's the main problem, because none of the parties propose to actually, I know some of them say a lot of things, but they don't want to actually do anything about making sure that these children live in more safer environments. They put them in horrible environments, then basically give people incentive to take kids away and make profit off of it, and it's absolutely disgusting. Children are not entities of the state. They're individuals that are born to their parents, and there are always better ways to get around these systems than taking kids away. And it makes me sick that there's an increase in money, because unless that money is being spent on giving the kids back somehow, which I don't think that's the case, then it's more of the same, and they will be expecting me on the doorstep of the Manitoba Legislative Building if this continues any longer. And I gave Greg Selinger enough of a hard time that he almost got a restraining order against me. So I mean, it's going to go right back to Pallister if this continues. And I warn them, I'm not going to stand down on this issue. It's disgusting. The future of children is the future of humanity itself, and when you abuse children and in the way that the CFS system is, there's going to be a problem. We are going to stand in the streets and demand answers and demand action, and not just action, actually, just the seizure of action and stopping taking kids away. You may go on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Josh. It's a problem that's a global problem with any CFS system that any government implements, and it's more government again. Mm-hmm. We're going to look at the community, economic, and resource development. There's actually been very simplified right now, which is kind of interesting. From the old post, they had Aboriginal and Northern Affairs, agricultural, food and rural development, conservation and water stewardship, housing and community development, infrastructure and transportation, jobs and economy, mineral resources, and then municipal government.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So going back to now, what they've done is they have agriculture, growth, enterprise, and trade. Mm-hmm. Then they have indigenous and municipal relationships. And then they have infrastructure. And then they have a post that I find very interesting, which is our good buddies at the UN with the sustainable development is actually now become a tab under spending for the government.
So Agenda 2030 is in action in Manitoba.
Yeah, so a lot of people said that, the PCs wouldn't, not be a part of anything like that. Well, here they go. They use the term sustainable development, and we know where that comes from. Josh, and it comes right from the belly of the beast.
Green communism, and I don't expect any different. Like I said, the PCs aren't actually conservative.
No, and it all comes down to now we actually have proof for you guys, because I just hate people talking about this left-right paradigm and fighting over which side you're going to be on the sinking ship. It's pretty ridiculous.
When the ship is going to sink, does it really matter which side you get on?
No, because we're all going down, guys.
And then we end up with more divisiveness and more people divided and fighting. And the whole thing is we need to work together to, as individuals, I should put out there, to overhaul this system. And this UN Agenda 2030 system is going to crush us. We're talking about complete green communism, and we're talking about carbon taxes on the away. We're talking about a whole bunch of issues that you'd expect from a communist nation, but here we are with the PCs.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And well, we're looking actually at they cut the cost on the resource development side of things, which is quite interesting too, down by about $650 million.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, that's a cut, but you guys added way more on the other side. So actually, we're looking at like the compared deficits right now. Going back to that, before I do that, actually, I want to tell you how much our debt servicing costs have gone up. It's gone up another $10,000 every year. And of course, the more debt you have, the more interest you're going to pay. They're never going to pay down that principal.
No.
You got to remember that this is what all governments believe in. They just believe in that they could spend money that they never have and just transfer it to somebody down the line.
Yeah.
This is what all like big collectivist governments does. Is they want to spend a whole bunch of money that they don't have. Now, just looking at the rest of it here, there's not too much else to it. Just the main numbers, remember this, it's $890 billion, almost $1 billion that they're spending right now that they don't have. No government should be allowed ever to borrow money from anybody, because the government is supposed to be funded by the people, if any government.
Yeah,
if that. So, listen, we over doubled the deficit. We're running the Manitoban economy into a complete rut with the global economy slowing down. You're just going to double down and spend more money and expand the government to massive amounts. It's a horrible idea, and you're going to continue to destroy civil society if you keep on adding this massive amounts of money into your government.
Yeah.
You're spending $470 million almost more than you have then actually the NDP that everybody hated, and they voted you guys in the PCs to actually they believe that you're going to be more responsible, but look at this, like there's the same guys.
NDP, Liberal, Conservatives, it doesn't matter. And I mean,
they're politicians.
And like the thing is about the cuts with the Conservatives, they're talking about running with scissors and during the election, and I was just thinking, I hope he runs with a chainsaw. That's what we need. But the thing is, the way that he cuts, the way that the PCs cut, they only cut, like the Stephen Harper Conservatives, they only cut in the ways that piss people off. They don't cut where it's most important. They cut it's almost like a script. They make it's like to make themselves look like terrible people. They only cut like certain things that aren't major priorities.
We all got to remember that the government, like all these politicians, they're all there to actually have job security. Yeah. And that's the way it is. They're willing to do and say whatever they can to get into power, to get that money for themselves, and because a lot of these people are not productive people that could go out into the economy and produce something.
Can you imagine these people in the private sector?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if the private sector worked in the way that the government worked, like these businesses would go under in no time. And a big example is right behind us. We've got the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. It's that gigantic eyesore. I think you guys can see that well. And they paid insane amounts of money, and I think they made back $1 million last year, but they spent $350 million on it. Can you imagine if a private business did that? They'd be bankrupt instantly.
Most of it was taxpayers' money. It was actually funded by the corporate elite, the oligarchs here in Manitoba.
Yeah, and it's just more of the same. It's always government control and coercion and whatever they can do in order to control us and make us good, apathetic little slaves. It doesn't matter which party it is. We need to bring things back to the individual, and I think that's the bottom line for this whole report, is we need to bring things back to the individual. We need to stand up against this stuff. Okay, I hope they do lower the PST. Personally, I think they should abolish it, but I hope they do lower the PST. I haven't seen anything yet. Have you looked into that?
Well, we'll see. It says that they're going to have less income from the provincial sales tax this year.
So they're going to put it down like 1%.
Who knows? We might see. I think 1% is nothing. So
yeah, well, like the percentile that they were bashing the NDP for in the first place, like before they actually raise the PST, they're saying like the PST is too high, we need to lower it. But then the NDP adds a percent onto the PST without the referendum, which by the way is illegal, and the PCs are like, we're going to lower it 1%. Wait a second, though. Like, you were saying that was bad in the first place. Then they raise it, and then you lower it back to where you said it was ridiculous in the first place. Get rid of it. Abolish it. It's absurd.
Abolish taxation. That's the only way to freedom for people, guys. It's time to actually see what government really is. It's just a monster that keeps on growing until it becomes unsustainable, like the Roman Empire and other big economies that have been in the past. It's always fails because it overgrows and people are greedy, they want more and more, and then suddenly there's no more to take from that are productive, and it collapses in on itself.
And before you guys call us crazy extremists, let's also put this into perspective. Very little of our taxes actually goes towards infrastructure. I know because my father is a foreman at the city of Winnipeg. It's a very small percentage. And, they're always talking about, what about my roads? What about my roads? Well, that's nonsense, because in the end, when you actually look at where the taxes are going, how much is it? Like 40 to 60% towards like the interest on the debt? Like, come on.
Actually, I think, just give me a second here. I'm going to look up the actual number of what's going into the infrastructure. So the total is actually about 7% of the budget actually goes to create infrastructure for the citizens of Manitoba, and it's quite a low number compared to the big posts like that are 50%, which is actually our health sector right now. It's massive.
And what did I remember? The Manitoba Party proposed something, and they offered $10,000 to any economist that can debunk it. And how much were they saying that they could cut tax with keeping the infrastructure?
100%.
I mean, there's so many ways to fund infrastructure, and we have to have a more voluntary system in place and a more free market, because we're only monopolizing things. All the things that people are blaming on so-called capitalism, which doesn't actually exist with the current monopolization and manipulation by the government. All these examples of how these monopolies are working can be said about government. Government is creating these monopolies, and people keep blaming it on the wrong kind of they blame it on the private sector and say we need to use more government to stop the monopolization, but the government is making the monopolization in the first place. And if we want to end the monopolies, we've got to stop doing what we're doing over and over again, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, and we need to massively reform this stuff, because we are in huge trouble in Manitoba and elsewhere.
People
globally.
in Manitoba need to have a big discussion about what kind of society we want.
Exactly.
That's where it comes down to, and we need to have a serious conversation without politicians involved that are just fraudulent and they just want to make money no matter what, and they just tell you whatever you want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Bunch of hypocrites. They don't care about you, but we do. So check out WAM if you haven't already. World Alternative Media. We've got a Facebook page, YouTube, and Twitter. We've got a website, worldalternativemedia.com. Follow us for much more information, because we are on your side. We are on the individual side. We're not on some collective like, oh, I have a harebrained idea, I'm going to impose it on everyone. No, we want freedom of the individual, freedom and liberty. Look into it. Look into all the facts we've given you today, because they are facts, and I want you guys to go out there, be vigilant, look at it yourselves, because we are all depending on you as individuals to do something about this, because we can't just look at the government to fix the problems of government. And in the end, we as individuals have a lot of power. There's a popular quote that says, if you think that you as an individual don't have power, try sleeping in a tent with one mosquito. Then you'll see how much one person makes a difference. So thank you, John. We'll be coming back at you with much more soon. Stay tuned. This is Sigurdson, John Sneisen, signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.